Mr. Vice President, Your Excellencies, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, friends, welcome to Uganda and the 9th e-learning for Africa conference. Thank you for providing me with this opportunity to speak before you. I am the CEO of Yazmi, a company that's passionate about delivering a uniform learning experience for children in Africa. My own passion is driven by my personal story and its connection to education here in Africa. You see, I am an African. I was born and raised in Ethiopia by a Sudanese father and an Ethiopian mother. My dad was a science teacher in his early years, and he taught me that almost anything was learnable with a little bit of effort, a little bit of confidence. Later in his life, he worked in Tanzania for the Liberation Committee of the OAU, the Organization for African Unity. At an impressionable age, while he was working there, he made it possible for me to routinely meet nation builders, heroes like Amilcar Cabral, Samora Machel, Oliver Tambo, and Julius Nyerere. I completed my primary and secondary schooling here in Africa, supported by caring parents and in close proximity to some of the giants of the 20th century. Giants who shaped the character of their nations on the anvil of their personal sacrifice. I can safely say I carried Africa with me when I went for my studies in the UK and the USA. There I learned basic sciences and the arts. I did some graduate work in European Renaissance history at UCLA, where among other things I learned about two developments that led to Europe's emergence from the Dark Ages, namely Europe's discovery of knowledge amassed by ancient Greek, Roman, and Islamic civilizations, and the invention of the Gutenberg printing press, which enabled the duplication and wide dissemination of that knowledge. So my graduate work at UCLA made me wonder if that experience of the Renaissance could be duplicated. Could we, by duplicating such an experience, indigenously grow an African path to development? I wondered if Africa can usher a new century by simply creating a new paradigm for the equitable distribution of knowledge, but on a massive scale. A paradigm that empowers every educator and student to learn, to imagine, to create. After UCLA, but still mulling this big question, I went on to study law, where I stumbled upon space law. And there, among other things, I learned about satellites, what they do, and how they and the electromagnetic spectrum that they use is regulated and licensed. I was particularly fascinated, really enthralled by a satellite's ability to reach and deliver any kind of information across continents. I toyed with the idea of how great it would be to launch a satellite that covers all of Africa, a satellite that would again amass knowledge from the world and deliver it directly to the people on this continent. In my first few jobs, I worked as a lawyer, helping companies get frequencies and orbital locations from national and international organizations. But one good day, on July 23, 1990 to be precise, I decided to set up a company that would get frequencies and the necessary licenses needed to build, launch, and operate a satellite over Africa. So when I made this decision, I had no company, no frequencies, no technology, and no money. But to make a long story short, I embarked on a lonely journey to develop the technology, plan its build-out, obtain the licenses, and the $2 billion needed to launch and operate the service. It took me 8 years to build and launch the first satellite. At that time, I remember clearly I made the conscious decision to launch that satellite over Africa and not Asia or Latin America as was being proposed by my team. To be sure, these achievements that I had were peppered by many challenges, big and small, but not even the bankruptcy that we went through during the global financial crisis of 2008 stopped us from our mission. We got back on our feet, reorganized the assets, solidified our focus, but this time we made the focus on the education sector alone. They say you can't keep a good man down. I really don't know about that, but I do know that you can't keep a good idea that wants to happen from happening. For the first 10 years after the launch of the AfriStar satellite, we delivered education to radios and computers. Also, the Africa Learning Channel provided information on a wide range of subjects throughout the last decade. We also created a service that broadcast curricula, books, and videos to schools and organizations. The broadcast was sent directly to one of our satellite receivers attached to a computer. However, the technology of the 1990s allowed us to build an infrastructure that can broadcast to a handheld radio or a desktop computer. But it was not until 2010 that the right confluence between broadcast and computing technologies allowed us to re-engineer our business altogether. This confluence of computing and broadcast technologies has enabled us to deliver what we believe could be a game-changing solution to the massive problem of education in places such as sub-Saharan Africa. We reasoned that if we can provide the same quality of education to rural areas as we can to the best urban settings, if indeed high quality education can be delivered to poor and rich alike, irrespective of their connectivity to the internet or the electrical grid, then we think the time has come for Africa to grow its steady stable of well-educated children to build its nations. If we can deliver high-quality education to all educators and all students alike, I believe our ability to create an African Renaissance, or at least the conditions thereto, or an African century, has finally arrived. Most sub-Saharan African countries are struggling to provide uniform, quality education to their student population, especially to the larger population that reside in rural areas. Out of the 57 million primary school-age children out of school worldwide, 32 million are in Africa, are in sub-Saharan Africa. And only 69% of those that remain in school actually complete their school. For those in school, the rural areas and the urban slums are the most hit by structural challenges, like poor building infrastructure, rising class sizes, shortage of textbooks. You know the list. There is also a severe shortage of teachers, and what teachers there are often require subject matter and pedagogical training. The teacher shortage in Africa is the most acute from anywhere else in the world. According to UNESCO's Institute for Statistics, 2.1 million new teachers will be needed to teach a rising population of students created by the Millennium Development Goals of primary education for all. This is in addition to the 2.6 million teachers that will be needed to replace teachers naturally leaving the teaching profession. Another 4.1 million teachers are needed to meet the needs of lower secondary education students and approximately 1 million teachers to educate those in secondary schools. In short, we require a staggering 10 million teachers to teach the children of Africa and empower them to become the future custodians of one of the richest resource-endowed continents on our planet. Just think, if every teacher taught only 30 seconds, 10 million teachers will affect the destiny of 300 million students. Better yet, 10 million teachers will affect what those well-educated students can do in Africa, for Africa. Solving the problem of educating, training, providing continued professional development for 10 million teachers is the monumental challenge of our times. But not finding a solution that addresses this challenge is a huge problem for the continent, its people, and arguably the rest of mankind. So to truly educate 300 million students, what do we need? We need many, many things, but at minimum, we require teachers that know the subject matter and they are teaching and have been taught the art and the science of teaching. You need an environment that supports professional development and learning for teachers. You need tools, learning tools, textbooks, books, virtual labs, at minimum to be delivered to these schools. You need a school system that understands teacher and student needs in near real time through continuous feedback. There are many factors that actually go into the highest performing schools of the world, but invariably high performing countries invest heavily in their teachers. They carefully select their future teachers from the best students in the country. They train them well, they mentor them well, they provide them access to develop professionally. Above all, they honor and reward their teachers. By contrast, in many places across sub-Saharan Africa, the teaching profession is not sufficiently esteemed to attract the highest quality entrants. Many teachers do not have appropriate subject matter knowledge about the subjects they are teaching. Many lack pedagogical skills and appropriate methods for assessing student learning. Accordingly, many teachers are not as motivated, and this leads to higher teacher absences, creating further acute teacher shortages in the region. Additionally, they are expected to teach in environments that lack adequate teaching tools, including the basic textbooks they need to provide to students. Finally, as if this is not enough, teachers have to deal with very large class sizes, stressing both the teaching and the learning experience. So my company, Yazmi, has been thinking about these issues for some time, and we believe we've come up with a solution, at least one of potentially many other solutions, that addresses a number of these challenges. It requires the use of the world's first and only satellite-enabled tablets. The solution actually consists of 4 elements. Number 1, there is a specially engineered satellite that currently covers every inch of Africa. And this satellite broadcasts as we speak. It broadcasts directly to a tablet. Second, you need a satellite-enabled tablet with a small satellite dish, literally this size. And the satellite antenna enables the content to be received directly from the satellite at broadband speeds. The tablet requires no training to operate. You literally take it out of the box and turn it on. Here's what's best about the whole thing. The entire service fee consists of the price of the satellite-enabled tablet. That's it. One-time fee. There are no recurring data fees, nothing. The third element is a solar power charger that is capable of charging the tablet when and where needed, particularly where people and students and teachers are out of the electrical grid. Finally, the fourth element consists of a classroom server with a Wi-Fi that intra-connects, not internet, intra-connects the classroom of tablets. The server basically continually stores satellite data transmissions and polls student activity on their tablet. The server provides backup transmission for students that may have missed transmissions from the satellite. It also acts like a content library for students to get reference material or to review things they have not downloaded or is too big to download. Finally, the server can poll, if you will, grab student test and homework performances to provide teachers and administrators with analytics for assessing learning outcomes. A typical student would be able to use the tablet to receive content directly from the satellite or from the server in the classroom. The student will require no internet activity to receive all the content approved for him or for her to receive. Every time the student logs into the server literally grabs the information on how that student used the tablet. The information from the tablet can be used to analyze learning outcomes and areas for improvement for the student, the teacher, or the school system. The student will also not require electricity because of the solar charger that's provided to every student to charge his or her tablet. A typical teacher, on the other hand, will also receive a tablet but with special content that can provide subject matter lesson plan and elucidation. The teacher will also receive additional reference material. The teacher may also receive feedback on student performances based on assessment analytics pulled from the teacher, or receive information or education for his or her professional development objectives. Teacher and student alike can receive scheduled lessons or other transmissions live from super teachers on subjects, for example, deemed to be necessary based on data obtained from the assessment analytics. A library of books can be made available, textbooks, syllabus, virtual labs that are obviously grade appropriate. This is an important point. Third graders will be able to receive textbooks as well as a large selection of reading materials that are relevant only to third graders. This is because the tablets are individually addressable to make sure each student gets content that is relevant to his or her grade of study. In summary, Yazmi is preparing to deliver affordable and equitable broadband access to transform the process of learning through e-learning. We at Yazmi are also committed to support and maintain the teacher-led learning model in schools. Research studies have found that skilled teachers in primary and secondary schools can have a significant and lasting positive impact on students' educational outcomes, regardless of other factors. The US technology magazine Wired recently focused on a teacher in an impoverished area of Mexico. This teacher chose to drastically change his lesson plans and his teaching methods by relying on his computer and the internet to develop new lesson plans that challenged and enlightened his students. The result? 93% of his class passed the national math exam. 96% of his class passed the national language exam. While that same teacher in the previous year only had 55% of his class pass the math exam and 69% the language exam. Now just think about this. If a single teacher can make this kind of a difference, just imagine what millions of informed and inspired teachers can do, not just to teach students, but to actually change development outcomes across the continent. We believe this is an objective that can be achieved, and I would like to formally and openly invite all of you to partner with us to get it done. In 2003, with the help of President Mandela, I built a brick and mortar school in Freedom Park, South Africa, called the Freedom Park School. Today, that school has over 1,200 students. It has a library, a basketball and a tennis court, as well as a regulation-sized soccer field. This, I can tell you, was one of my two proudest achievements. Literally, to build a school with President Mandela, no less, that touches the lives of 1,200 students and those who will come after them. We never know how far our influence reaches when we educate someone, it is said. That is because we impact not just the person we touch, but we impact the persons that person touches. The other achievement was the launch of AfriStar, our satellite inspired by a dream for an African continent, for a renaissance in an African continent. I still dream, but now my dreams are of a satellite already in the sky that has started connecting the dots needed to enlighten an entire continent, one tablet at a time. Thank you very much.